Boston is bracing for the annual influx of college students returning for the fall semester. But when the moving vans roll into town, many of them will pull up outside apartment buildings rather than dorms. Mayor Marty Walsh says he'd like to see Boston's entire student population living on campus. And while that could be a reality for at least one area college, other schools have a long way to go. WGBH News reporter Adam Reilly has part 2 of this week's Focus Report.
We are really close to the city, but we are just removed.
When Boston College woos prospective students, the school's residential experience is a major selling point.
Adam, one of the defining principles of this residence hall is the student lounge.
Jack Dunn is a proud BC alum and now the university's spokesman. He says that as a group, BC students want to live on campus, not off.
Part of the reason is the exorbitant rents that are charged by absentee landlords who are also unresponsive to their needs. Students often face break-in issues when they go home at winter and spring break.
And there are more positive reasons. Lou Wilson and Emma Remy lived on campus for all 4 years before graduating this spring.
I guess the sense of community I felt like I wanted to keep living with this same group of people, and Boston College had given me 4 years of housing, and accommodations only got better as I went through the years.
The community of being in college is what you're really here for, in addition to classes. And when you're off campus by yourself, you don't get that experience.
Right now, 85% of BC undergrads live on campus. The school wants that figure to reach 100%, and it's building accordingly, including this soon-to-be dorm slated to house 500 students. According to Boston Mayor Marty Walsh, BC has the right idea.
I would love to see 100% of students on campuses across the city of Boston. The more students we can put on campus, the more housing stock it frees up in neighborhoods.
But making that vision a reality won't be easy. At Suffolk University, just 23% of full-time undergrads live on campus. At Northeastern, that figure is 52%. Those schools are in the middle of the city without much room for new construction. And even if they found a way to build more housing, their students might not be interested.
Things were crumbling and furniture's not that great either. The beds are super uncomfortable.
Jen Zemke is a junior at Emerson College, which requires students to spend their first 2 years living on campus. She says that means paying too much for too little.
Emerson housing is upwards of $7,000 a semester, which is like $2,000 a month, and I could be living in much nicer places for $2,000 a month.
That's a lot of money.
Yes, it is. It's ridiculous.
Zemke is moving to Dorchester. She'll save about $1,600 a month and says she won't miss communal living at all. Do you feel odd at all going so far away from Emerson?
Not really. It's only like a 20-minute T ride away from campus, so even for early classes, it shouldn't be that bad.
It's hard to imagine a student at Boston College thinking that way, but then a rich on-campus life is one of BC's big selling points. So, Kim, I should note that the apartment that we showed Jen Zemke in is not Emerson College housing. She's living in a summer sublet. We did try to get Emerson to go on camera to talk about how they strike a balance between on and off campus housing. Right. They wouldn't, and neither would most of the schools that we reached out to. Suffolk University wouldn't, Northeastern wouldn't, and Boston University wouldn't, although some of them provided statements. Right. And I was really surprised by that skittishness.
So what do you think? Why are they so sensitive?
I think that this is a really high-stakes conversation that's going on right now between the schools and Boston City Hall. Mayor Marty Walsh is, I think, pushing the colleges and universities in a way that Mayor Menino didn't. He's asked them, to identify students who are living off campus by name. Apparently, most of them are comfortable with that and are going along with it. And this idea of getting to 100% on-campus housing, that's asking a ton of schools, some of which don't have a whole lot of money. So right. I think that they are leery of saying anything publicly that might derail the sort of dance that's going on right now.
Sure. All right. Well, let's bring in Mike Ross now. He's a former Boston City Council president and candidate for mayor who made increasing access to on-campus student housing a priority. And it's good to have him with us here on Greater Boston. Why do you think they're so sensitive? Because as Adam said, a lot of these schools don't even want to talk about this.
Well, they have a lot of competing. It's great to see you, Kim, and good to be back. But they have a lot of competing priorities, right? It's not just dorms they want to build. It's science centers. It's new residence halls. It's new gathering places. It's new centers of campus. It's new cafeterias. These are marketing items that help bring more students in. dorms are part of that, but they're not everything to schools, and they're certainly not everything to those neighborhoods that are really feeling maybe the overbalance of student housing or the lack thereof.
But what do you say to kids like the young man who was in the story who said living on campus is part of the college experience?
Yeah, I mean, it is. And I think that if we could get to a much higher number, a north of 80% number for every campus, for every school, that would be great. Look, it's still nice to have students living in neighborhoods. I don't think anyone's saying we don't want any students in neighborhoods. And the goal should be a high goal. But right now we're seeing we're not making any progress. The Globe report that came out, the Shadow Campus report, talked about how we're actually losing beds.
Right.
And look, part of this is a good problem. There's more kids than ever want to come to this region. And now these schools that used to be commuter campuses are now residential campuses. Again, another good thing. But if we can't build enough in the dormitory markets and also in the private markets, we're going to be in trouble when we don't need to be.
I think Mayor Walsh is actually coming close to saying, and he may even explicitly be saying, I'd like 100% on campus. Now, whether he thinks that's really going to happen or whether he thinks, some of them will be off in campus-affiliated housing, I'm not entirely sure. I think there's an interesting question about whether the students who go to these schools will all feel the same way about on-campus housing. This is a point that Emerson made to me off camera, unfortunately, but they made the argument that we have students come to Emerson to do the co-op program. We have students come to Emerson who want to kind of be out in the adult and the professional world earlier than at a lot of other schools, and that it's difficult for them to make the pitch to on-campus living to their student body in a way that it might not be difficult at a school like BC. Now, that could change over time.
Sure.
Emerson's reinvented itself as a very selective national school. Pardon me, not Emerson, Northeastern has reinvented itself as a very selective national school rather than a regional school, so that could evolve.
Yeah, sure. I would also argue that I think when a student comes to a school that's in a big city, they don't always expect to live on campus. Would that be true, Mike?
Yeah, especially more expensive cities, San Francisco, New York City, Boston. Look, I think we're going to have to look at the current accommodations on campus. Some of these dormitories, they're dodgy. They're places where you wouldn't want to live.
Right.
So they're going to have to look at, because that's becoming more and more competitive.
But some of that off-campus housing is a little dodgy as well. And
it is.
These kids think they're going to save a lot of money if they don't live on campus, but it's very expensive to live off-campus as well.
The off-campus situation is a direct consequence of having a supply and demand problem where there are more students looking for housing, and so landlords, people like Anwar Faisal, who was in that report of the Globe, can really put out any product and they know that it will be rented, and that's unfortunate. But if you build more dorms and more private units across the city, including in Dorchester, like where your student is living, I think you can change this around. I don't think it's that hard.
Well, let me just ask you very quickly here, how do we compare to maybe some of these other big cities that have a lot of universities when it comes to kids living on campus versus off?
I mean, there's so many variables because some of those other schools don't have the same, those other cities don't have the same housing challenges that we face here in Boston. Again, I think some of this has to do with there are neighborhoods in our city that some students don't see as a viable neighborhood. Dorchester today isn't seen as that neighborhood where students or other young people might move to, but it could be. It could be. It really could be. It's a great neighborhood. There's access to public transportation, good restaurants. The mayor lives there.
Mike Ross, thank you for being with us. Good to see you, Adam, as well.